So this year we're learning for refuah for all the cholim of Klal Yisrael, and the next malacha is kindling, and in Hebrew you say it's mav'ir, mem bet ayin yud resh. You said ir because of the ayin. That's why you say mav'ir. Okay, fire is one of the basic requirements of mankind and is used as a creative tool. Its use demonstrates a person's creative ability and mastery over nature, and we surrender these attributes on Shabbos in deference to our Creator. In the modern world, the purpose of electricity is similar to that of fire, since both are utilized as a source of energy for productive means. According to one view, the use of any appliance capable of completing an electrical circuit falls within the malacha of building. Okay, now we have 7 prohibitions regarding kindling. A, igniting a flame or a spark. B, putting a substance into a fire.
Okay.
C, kindling one flame from another, transferring the flame from one candle to the other. Operating electric lights and appliances. Driving a motor vehicle. Ignition, operating signals, and accelerating. Using a telephone or microphone. And the last prohibition, opening a door with a magnetic card, pneumatic, photo, electric, or passive infrared system. Technology offers the opportunity for certain electrical appliances to be used on Shabbos without performing any malacha. These include 4 things: present time switches for lighting and heating, automatic elevators, hospital facilities such as Sharei Tzedek, Ichilov, etc., hospitals in Israel, and where they've developed a nurse call system and ways of heating food without using malacha. And another one is electric milking machines with a present timer. And the last point, traditional rules have combined with technology to result in unique facilities. However, the above examples provide only for basic Shabbos needs, sick people, and animal care. One should be mindful that the unlimited use of technology could endanger the spirit of Shabbos. Any personal queries related to the use of automatic devices on Shabbos should be referred to a reliable rabbinic authority.
Okay.
And you can't, talking about that, they didn't, because this book was probably written 20 years ago, they didn't mention the Kindle. You can't Kindle. The Kindle is also would fall under Kindle.
Very good, very funny. All right, Kevin, that's funny, actually.
Kevin, right. Where can you find a Kindle? If you're walking around, where would you be walking around to find a Kindle? In the Amazon.
If you're waxing lyrical, you can find a Kindle.
No, in the Amazon. I gave you the answer. Cheers, boy. Okay, let's carry on.
Okay, Damon got my joke. Okay.
No, so did Gavin, but you didn't get Gavin's joke.
Yeah, you missed my joke, so that's why I overrode yours.
Yeah, no. He said Amazon because the book's on. Yes, I get to get it. Yeah.
But it's courteous if you laugh at Gavin's joke.
So you said it so quickly, my mind.
Okay.
Gavin and Arthur finds it funny.
Okay, let's get started, guys, because I know Gavin's got a shirt at
8.
Yes, at 8 o'clock.
That's fine. I wanted to finish by 8 anyway. I was going to tell you. So, but okay. That's great. No, that's fine.
Now we will. We're forced to. Thank you so much.
All right. I'm going to share my screen, guys. All right. What I'm going to do, just going to ask you, is I'm actually going to just zoom in a little bit so it's easier to read. Okay. And then we'll just go step by step. Just give me 1 second, guys. Okay. All right. Gavin, you want to read?
Yeah, as soon as I've fixed up what's going on here. Just give me a second. I can't get back to that screen. Did something strange here. Okay, I don't see your sharing, eh?
It's sharing.
No, I don't see the sharing.
Right, I'll start it again. Kevin, can you see the share?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
I can't see it.
I'll read it then.
Yeah, read it then. Read it. I'll listen.
The Mishnah discusses damages resulting from one bringing his property into the domain of another. If a potter brought his pots into the homeowner's courtyard without permission, Arthur, are you on pause or you? Arthur, are you audio?
Sorry, I'll put on.
All right, guys, let me just read it again. Apologies, it's important. The whole duff is based on this.
I am reading it. I can see it now. I'm sharing as well.
All right, do you want to read it for us?
Sure, thank you. All right, cool. Okay, the mission discusses damages resulting from one's bringing his property into the domain of another. Okay, if a potter brought his pots into a homeowner's courtyard without permission and the homeowner's animal broke the pots, the homeowner is exempt from liability. And if the homeowner's animal was damaged through the pots, the owner of the pots is liable to pay for the damage. But if he brought his pots into the courtyard with the homeowner's permission and they were broken, the owner of the courtyard is liable. And then there's a similar case, which is if one brought his produce into a homeowner's courtyard without permission and the homeowner's animal ate it, the homeowner is exempt of liability. And if the homeowner's animal was harmed by the produce, the owner of the produce is liable to pay for damages. But if he brought the produce into the courtyard with the owner's permission, it was eaten. The owner of the courtyard is liable. Yet another case.
Yeah, good.
If one brought his ox into a homeowner's courtyard without permission and the homeowner's ox gored it or the homeowner's dog bit it, the homeowner is exempt from liability. And if the trespasser's ox gored the homeowner's ox, the trespasser is liable. If the trespasser's ox fell into the homeowner's cistern and fouled its waters, the trespasser is liable. If the homeowner's father or his son was in the cistern and was killed by the falling ox, the trespasser must pay the kofeh reparation. But if he brought his ox into the courtyard with the owner's permission and it was damaged there, the owner of the courtyard is liable. Then there's a dissenting opinion. Just move this up. The Rebbe says, in all these cases, the homeowner is liable for damage occurring.
No. Just repeat that. He's not liable, okay?
Sorry, okay. Dissenting opinion by Rebbe, who says, in all these cases, the homeowner is not liable, for damage occurring to property placed in his domain with permission, unless he explicitly accepts upon himself the obligation to guard it.
Excellent. Okay, well read. All right, it's a long Mishnah. It's a particularly long Mishnah, guys. So
it's one of the longest I've seen.
Yeah, it's the longest I've seen as well. So look, there's three examples of the same theme, and I just want to explain why. There's the potter, there is the person that brought produce, and then there's the ox. So why would we need three examples? Whereas a very simple explanation. Pottery is delicate. Okay, this is what Rashi said. Pottery is delicate, and produce is a little bit more hard wearing, in a sense that you would think that maybe you're responsible because ceramic can break easily, but you're not responsible for the produce side, simply because produce can not only break easily, but they're sharp shards that can go into another animal's foot and damage the homeowner's animal. Or your pottery can be broken very easily and be very expensive, whereas produce is a little bit more hardy and it might not be worth a lot of money. And it certainly doesn't seem to create injury like the shards of glass or pottery, etc. So that's why those two cases were brought. And you'd say, well, why bring the ox? Well, there's certain things that the ox has in terms of unique qualities. An ox is a fairly hardy animal. And because it's a hardy animal, you would think for sure then it's not your obligation to look after it if you gave somebody permission to come into your property with it. because it's not like delicate pottery or produce where, for example, parsley, etc., where it's also in fact a little delicate. Okay, so they use different examples. Now, I'll just explain to you what a cistern is that the only cistern we've got today is a toilet. I don't know if you know, where you flush the chain, there's that water that accumulates. And when you flush the drain, you actually have a plug that allows the water to go in and release it into the toilet. So a cistern used to be those big water containers, because fresh water was maybe dug from a borehole and it had to be stored and processed. So what happens if ox fell in and died? Obviously, with rigor mortis and decaying of flesh, it's going to ruin the entire waters, at which a trespasser would be liable for. And obviously, if the son and the father were in the cistern, the only thing I can think of is that that cistern was pretty big to be able to contain water, and you had to purify it, etc. So they were doing home repairs. As far as the overlying theme is concerned, there seems to be a theme that, if you bring your property into somebody else's domain without permission, clearly the homeowner cannot be responsible for it because you've actually trespassing. And so too, if you have produce, ceramics, or an ox, or anything that you take into property that's not your own, and it damages in another's property, as a trespasser, you are liable. Because what are you liable under the category of, guys? You're liable under the category of bore, a pit. Because just like in a public domain or a domain that's not exclusively your own, you are liable for any sort of obstruction or that might create a hazard that's stationary, because somebody's not expecting to see it. Why? They go to their garden area every day. They're not expecting to stand on a ceramic and have a shard of pottery through their foot. So it seems to imply that permission is the key factor here. If you want somebody to look after your stuff, if it breaks on their property, and if you don't want to be responsible for paying them for damages from your stuff. Okay, I'm going to start with the Gemara now. I hope I've made it clear. Gavin read it very well. All right. So, basically, the Gemara discusses an inference that may be drawn from the Mishnah's opening clause. The Mishnah implies that the reason the potter is liable to pay for the damage that his pots caused to the landlord's animal is that he brought them into the courtyard without permission. But if he brings them in with the landlord's permission, the owner of the pots is not liable for damage that they caused to the landlord's animal. And we do not say that by requesting permission and then bringing his pots in, the owner of the pots surely accepts implicit responsibility for guarding the landlord's animal from being damaged by his pots. Whose opinion is this? So the Gemara is asking a question. What's the question the Gemara is asking? It's saying, fine, I understand that if you don't ask that if you don't ask permission, that you are fully liable. However, the second statement, which seems to state the owner of the pot surely the owner of the pots is not liable for damage they cause to the landlord's animal. Okay, that is basically saying what? That the owner of the pots is not accepting responsibility for any of the damages pots cause on the property. Okay, whose opinion is this? It's the opinion of Rebbe, who said at the end of the Mishnah that in any situation where an object is placed somewhere by mutual consent, but responsibility is not specified, one does not automatically accept himself the obligation of guarding his fellow's property from damage. Okay? So in other words, what it's saying is that the owners of the pottery can't be expected to, even if he's gained asked permission from the landowner to bring in his pottery, he can't be responsible for watching that pottery, according to Rebbe. Why? Because he's not there. He's bringing it into another person's house and leaving it there. So since he's not obviously taking on the role of an unpaid custodian, how is he meant to watch his pottery if the homeowner's animal happens to trample on? Because it's enough that the homeowner, according to Rebbe, is aware that the guy put his pottery in because he had permission. Okay. So the Gemara asks, now consider the latter part of that clause. If he brought his pots into the courtyard with the owner's permission and they were broken, the owner of the courtyard is liable. So now he's saying it seems to be contradictory. Why? Because why would the homeowner be liable if he damaged the pots, but the pottery guy would not? So it seems to be that second statement is the opinion of the rabbis, and the first statement is the opinion of Rebbe. Again, the rabbis are saying a blanket rule. If you are granted permission, you're not a trespasser. If you leave your objects, then in the domain of the homeowner, you haven't created a pit. Because just like when you create a hazard in your property, you know where that hazard is. So too the guy knows where the pottery is, your oxen, etc. And you haven't surprised him in any way. Okay? So, and neither is he responsible. Let me just share my screen a second with the Mishnah, because this would help you out tremendously. Just give me 1 second, guys. Okay, let me just. All right, so let me just clear this up. If a potter brought his pots into the homeowner's courtyard without permission and the homeowner's animals broke the pots, the homeowner is exempt of liability. Why? Because he didn't grant permission, so you can't expect to pay for damage where somebody kept their stuff on your property when you didn't even know that the hazard was there. And if the homeowner's animal was damaged through the pots, the owner of the pots is liable to pay for damage. Why? Because you've created a hazard where both the homeowner as well as his animals cannot anticipate the surprise. But if he brought his pots in the courtyard with the homeowner's permission and they were broken, the owner of the courtyard is liable. Okay, so that's the contradictory statement. Why is it contradictory? I want one of you guys to work it out.
Let me just read that.
But if he brought his pots into the courtyard with the homeowner's permission and they were broken, the owner of the courtyard is liable.
It shouldn't be the owner. It should be the guy who brought his pots in. He's liable.
No, he came there with permission.
He came in with permission. Sorry. Okay, the homeowner of the courtyard is liable.
Why is it a contradiction? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Understood. Let me read it again.
Dane?
The main issue is that the kalim were broken. That's the issue here.
Yeah, but there's a contradiction, Art.
The contradiction that, you gave the guy permission to bring it into the courtyard, okay? He's not a person that can look at it all the time, so he should, just there.
Okay, so let's just take, Arthur, just say that again.
Even though he gave him permission to bring it in, okay, he didn't say he was going to be watching the pot to make, like that. It wasn't like he said, I'm going to watch the animal.
Okay, so Arthur's got the right answer. So there seems to be a contradiction where that statement is seeming to be more like Rebbe. Because Rebbe is saying that the homeowner basically doesn't accept permission to look after the guy's pottery. Okay? And that's why. So in other words, if he brought his pots into the courtyard with the homeowner's permission and they were broken, the owner of the courtyard is liable. Okay? You see, because he said he came with permission. So why is the owner of the courtyard liable?
Because it's like then he's because if he gave permission, then he's becoming like a paid custodian almost.
Yes, so this is actually the discussion. That's exactly the discussion, Kevin. Is that what actually is going on here? Is that how much responsibility do you have? Do you say that when you give each other permission to enter, you basically cancel out liability for each person? Do you say that? In other words, listen, I know your pot plant is here. If I step on it or the animals are, I will endeavor to pay because it's not a surprise. It's in my garden. I see it's in my garden. So therefore, I'll act as an unpaid custodian. Exactly, Kevin. And so too, the pottery owner says that, okay, so you're going to pay for my stuff that's broken. And I'm not responsible now with that pottery if it damages you. Why? Because it's not a surprise. In other words, you have to pay for it. Hang on. You have to pay for it if you break it because you know where it is, but I don't have to pay if it injures your animal anymore. Why? Because you know it's there. Does that make sense? You know it's there. Now, Rebbe's got a different opinion. Rebbe's opinion is saying, look, the homeowner can say, this is a bit unfair. Why is it unfair? It's because, hang on a second, I need this headache like a hole in the head. I must look after your stuff, and if anything happens to it, I need to pay to fix it. But basically, because I've given you permission to enter my property with it, I'm aware that it's there, and therefore, if it injures me or anybody else, I can't sue you, but you can sue me if it's broken. That's not a very fun arrangement. It's very one-sided. It's one thing if you turn around and say, look, listen, you get permission. It's no longer creating a hazard I don't know about. So if it damages me, I don't want to hear about it, but that's fine. But if your stuff gets damaged, you're leaving it here at your own risk. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's the issue we're dealing with here in the Gemara.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah, Kev?
The main issue is storage, and the guy who gave permission, the homeowner gave permission, he's doing the guy a favor, saying, oh, you can store it, and I'm sure if once he takes possession, the next kinyan, he'll put it in a safe place, and that's what then he shouldn't have any liability if anything happens. It's basically a storage issue.
Yes,
he's doing him a favor.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. But the problem is, as an unpaid custodian, is still responsible for negligence. That's in essence the problem here. That's in essence the problem. So we're saying if it's the role of the unpaid custodian that he's doing him a favor, the homeowner Rebbe says the homeowner needs it like a hole in the head. It's a headache. Who wants that pressure? So in other words, the homeowner says, fine, keep your stuff here. I'm not charging you. I'm doing you the storage at no cost. But I don't want to hear if it gets broken. It's your problem. And the rabbis are saying no. The rabbis are saying no. What happens is if you don't get permission and somebody trips on it, you're liable for their damage, for example, right? You're liable for a piece of pottery going through your foot because you hadn't asked permission to put your stuff there. And what happens is you can't hold the homeowner liable because you never asked him to bring the stuff. You're bringing it into a foreign property. So the rabbis are basically saying that that permission is the key factor. But the problem is that there's a greater level of responsibility, it seems, with the homeowner than the owner of the pottery. Does that make sense? Because as the minute he asks permission, it's as if the homeowner is an unpaid custodian, exactly like Kevin said, as opposed to somebody that just said, store it here at your own risk. So I'm just going to, now that we got a good understanding, and let's start the Gemara again and just quickly fly through it, and it'll make a lot of sense to you guys. Okay? Fine.
7:30 p.m.
All right. The Gemara discusses an inference that may be drawn from the Mishnah's opening clause. The Mishnah implies that the reason the potter is liable to pay for the damage that his pots caused to the landlord's animal is that he brought them into the courtyard without permission. Therefore, it's considered a bore, under the category of bore, a hazard, because the person is surprised by it. But if he brings them with the landlord's permission, the owner of the pots is not liable for damage that they caused to the landlord's animal, because the landlord should then either, as Kevin said, direct the pottery away or whatever, or make sure his animal doesn't go near there, so then his animal won't get damaged, because he's aware it's there. And we do not say that by requesting permission and then bringing his pots in, the owner of the pots surely accepts implicit responsibility for guarding the landlord's animal from being damaged by his pots. Okay? Whose opinion is this? It's the opinion of Rebbe, who said at the end of the Mishnah that in any situation where an object is placed somewhere by mutual consent, but responsibility is not specified, one does not automatically accept upon himself the obligation of guarding his fellow's property from damage. Okay. So Rebbe and the rabbis of our Mishnah disagree whether a homeowner who grants permission, this is the essence of it, guys. Rebbe and the rabbis of our Mishnah disagree whether a homeowner who grants permission for something to be brought into his domain is understood as implicitly undertaking to guard it from damage. The Gemara assumes that the same dispute pertains to one who requests permission of a homeowner to place something in his domain. According to the rabbis, the person implicitly undertakes to ensure that his items do not damage the homeowner, but according to Rebbe, he cannot be presumed to have undertaken this responsibility. Thus, the Mishnah's first clause, which implies that when the potter requests permission, he is exempt from paying damages to the homeowner's animal, and this follows the opinion of Rebbe. That's what Rashi says, okay? So the Gemara asks, now consider the latter part of that clause, which we read, guys. If he brought his pots in to the courtyard with the owner's permission, and they were broken, the owner of the courtyard is liable. Here we have arrived at the opinion of the rabbis, who say that even the matter of responsibility is not specified. By consenting that something be brought into his domain, one surely accepts upon himself the obligation of guarding it from damage. Apparently then, the Mishnah's first clause begins with the opinion of Rebbe and concludes with the opinion of the rabbis, okay? For with respect to a situation in which the pots were placed in the yard by mutual consent, the first ruling exempts the potter of liability for damages to animals, in accordance with Rebbe, whereas the last ruling holds the homeowner liable for damages to the pots in accordance with the rabbis. Okay, so what it's saying is, when we read the first clause, it says, listen, you leave your pottery there and you leave. According to Rebbe, you can't be expected to sit there and see if your pottery does damage. The owner knows it's there. Okay, so that seems to be the opinion of Rebbe. Then it goes to it seeming to be the opinion of the rabbis that say, listen, you've given permission, and therefore, if you've given permission for the pottery to be on your property, you know it's there, and if you damage it, you have to break it. Okay, so it seems that
not break it, pay for it.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks,
I made a mistake on the wording. It's just the accident. Sorry.
Yes, I did. That he has to pay for it if there's breakage. Exactly. Thanks, Gab. So that's exactly it. If the homeowner's animal stood in it and broke the pottery, the homeowner was aware the pottery was there, and therefore, by giving permission, he knows it's there. He takes responsibility to pay the pottery maker if it's broken. Wording better. Gav, wording better?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Kev, what were you going to ask?
No, I'm just summing my finger. No.
Okay, let me just finish the last one.
Sorry.
What?
I'm listening. I'm just getting a yarmulke.
All right.
Carry on. Sorry, I wasn't wearing a yarmulke.
No, wait for you while you got to.
Yeah. Carry on.
Okay, Cranberry, go sit down. Be a nice cat. Yes, otherwise you would. All right. So
now you'll become muad if the cranberry doesn't listen.
True. Okay. So basically, we see then the Mishnah's first clause begins with the opinion of Rebbe and concludes with the opinion of the rabbis. And furthermore, the final clause of the Mishnah states, Rebbe says in all these cases, the homeowner is not liable unless the homeowner explicitly accepts upon himself the responsibility to guard the property placed in his domain. Thus, the first and the last parts of the Mishnah present the opinion of Rebbe, but the middle parts present the opinion of the rabbis. The Gemara responds, Rabbi Zera said, the Mishnah, as it appears, is indeed self-contradictory. Whoever taught this ruling did not teach that ruling. Just give me 1 sec, guys. Come, Chris, come. All right. Just give me a second. Come, Cranberry. Come.
Good question.
Yeah?
If you do Cranberry 3 times, are you mad?
Yeah, I don't know. I thought it's a good shada. All right, guys, just give me a sec. So there's an alternative explanation, which is quite interesting by Rava. Rava said the entire first clause is the unequivocal opinion of the rabbis, who actually dispute Rebbe. Okay? And regarding the case where the pots were brought in with permission, where the Mishnah seems self-contradictory, the explanation is as follows. This is important. The owner of the courtyard, okay, by granting permission, implicitly accepts upon himself the obligation of guarding the pots and paying for damage to them, even if they occurred that they broke in the wind. What do we mean? Is he becomes an unpaid custodian where you're responsible for theft and loss. Okay? That's why when he grants the potter permission to leave his pots there, he means to accept full responsibility for them in the manner of a custodian who must guard them from damage not only by his own animal but also from other causes. The potter, by contrast, does not mean to accept responsibility at all, but merely to entrust his pots to the homeowner's care. According to the laws of the homeowner and the potter are distinct with respect to their liability towards one another. The homeowner is liable if his animals damage the pots, but the potter is not liable if his pots cause the damage to the animals. Okay? So basically, Rava rejects the initial assumption that the homeowner and the potter are regarded equally. He explains, guys, that whereas the homeowner is obligated to guard the pots, that's because they are left in his care. But the potter isn't obligated to guard the homeowner's animals from being damaged by his pots. Why? Because how is he going to remain in the yard at all times? So that's why the Mishnah's ruling is worded precisely. The potter is liable for damage to the animals if he didn't have permission, and exempts if he did have permission. And the homeowner is liable for damage to the pots if he granted permission, but exempt if he did not grant permission. So Rebbe basically disagrees and maintains that even the homeowner is exempt unless he explicitly undertakes to guard the pots. So Rebbe's default position, according to the Rosh, is that the homeowner is exempt unless he says he's going to guard the pots. The rabbis say...
That makes the most sense, by the way.
What?
Makes the most...
Rebbe makes the most sense.
It really does.
I agree with you.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that.
No. Listen, I absolutely agree with you. Exactly that. Initially, the rabbis were understood as holding that the homeowner is liable only if his animals break the pots. So therefore, the logical explanation is that by granting permission, the homeowner also didn't undertake custodial obligations. He undertook to protect against normal damage, maybe from the land sharing arrangement, like if he stood on the pot. But it's now going further to say that he's even responsible if something extraneous happens, like a wind, etc. And it also followed that the potter assumed the same degree of responsibility. That's what we thought. So that the homeowner would be liable if his animals broke the pots. So then the potter would also be liable if his pots tripped on the animals. So Rava offers a new insight into the rabbi's opinion. And he says that the homeowners actually undertake to be a custodian over the pots. And then the pottery guy, once he leaves the premises, is free of responsibility. Okay. So just note that since the homeowner and the potter share the use of the yard, neither can be held liable under the ordinary laws of damage, guys. So in other words, if the homeowner's animals break the pots with its feet, he's not liable under the law of regal. Why? Because they're sharing the yard. They both have permission to be there. We learned that. And if he trips and he injures, the potter isn't liable under the laws of bor, because it's not the public domain. It's shared, agreed that they both have permission to be there. We learned that. Remember the partners of a common area? We learned that. So the laws are basically inapplicable where both parties have permission to use the common area in this manner. So the only way either of them can be held liable is if he actually undertakes to guard his fellow's property from damage, and then is negligent. So that's where this thing of the unpaid custodian concept comes in. Now, so we're on page 47b2. The Mishnah stated if one brought his produce into the homeowner's courtyard without permission and the homeowner's animal was damaged through the produce, the owner of the produce is liable to pay for the damage. We talk about without permission. This ruling is qualified. Rav said they taught that the owner of the produce is liable only regarding a case where the animal slipped on it and was injured. But if it ate too much and died, he is exempt of liability. What's the reason? Well, the animal should not have eaten. So Rav ruling is disputed, okay? Because let me just explain to you what this whole reasoning is that you can't hold the owner of the produce liable for damage that the animal brings upon itself willingly. That's according to Tosfot. So basically, when one's animal is fire or is bore damage, something else, his property is considered the damager, and therefore you're liable to pay. But when a victim uses one's object to harm himself or itself, it's not considered a damager. Thus, he's exempt even though the damage was not expected. Does that make sense, guys?
Just repeat that actually, or explain it. I didn't actually.
All right.
Yeah, repeat it, please.
Right. Listen, I've got produce, and I left it in your property without permission. Okay. Rav is basically saying this is only a case where if the animal slipped on it and was injured, I would have to pay. Because I left it there without permission. The homeowner didn't know it was there. Maybe the homeowner, let's even say the homeowner slipped on it. Okay? It was edible to animals in the home. But he slipped on it and landed up in Netcare or links to a park clinic or Mill Park or whatever with a fractured leg. You'd have to pay for the damage, but not if a human being or an animal ate it and then got sick. Why? Because it didn't mean that you have permission to consume somebody else's property. You know, even if it's poison ivy or you got a gastroenteritis or whatever you've got, if you don't see it and you slip, you're responsible. Why? Because you created a bore. You don't have permission to be there. It was a surprise to the guy. It's a hazard. It's a bore. That's direct damage. Leaving a food there where the person got sick, when he doesn't have permission to eat your food, or the animal doesn't, you never forced the animal to eat your food, that's not your problem. The person harmed themselves with your property. It's not direct. So Rav is saying that when it's talking about the produce, it can't mean in this Mishnah that the owner, if you don't have permission to be there, the owner of the produce is liable because the animal did it to itself. It can only be a case where if he slipped on the produce, he's liable. Because we don't make the owner of the produce liable even if he went there without permission. Only for the bore aspect, for creating hazard, but not for eating because the animal ate of its own volition. You didn't feed it to the animal. Does that make sense, guys? So Rav's position is the produce, you're only liable if you don't have permission to leave it there for the slippage, not for the eating. Fine. Rav's ruling is disputed. Rav Sheshes says, I say that Rav stated this teaching while drifting into sleep. Otherwise, he would never have said it.
That's quite harsh, yeah.
No, but it's not an insult. It's actually a praise to Rav. Let me tell you why. Listen carefully. It's quite clever. Because Rav Sheshes is saying Rav is such a genius that unless he was drifting off to sleep, he would never say something like this. This is how much respect I have for Rav. It's a backhanded compliment, not an insult.
Yeah, it does.
That's why you always say that to Kevin. That's why you always say it to Kevin. That he's drifting off. You're so bright, Kevin. I told you you're so bright.
Exactly, Kevin.
Kevin, but not in your league, Kevin.
No, in a different league. You're ahead of me, China. You in the first league. I'm in like third division.
In the Chinese league, yes.
Okay, maybe you're right. You're all in the Chinese league. You're all going to be working for them. Don't worry.
No, okay. you get the. So yeah, I also thought it was an insult when I read it yesterday.
No, it wasn't.
I also thought it was actually an insult. Yeah, you see. So it was actually they wouldn't do that.
No, they wouldn't
insult each other.
Denigrate each other.
No, exactly not. Yeah.
So he said, "You're such a genius that I don't understand. You always say genius things. If you said something like this, it must have been because you were like half asleep. So it's a praise. Why? Because Rav Sheshes said, look, it was taught in a brisa, okay? If one places poison before his fellow's animal and the animal eats it and dies, he is exempt from paying under the laws of man. In other words, the court cannot exact payment from him. Why? Because very simply is that he's not liable under the law of bor. It's not direct damage. The animal didn't slip on it and the animal ate it of its own volition, but he said he is liable under the laws of heaven. Why? Because unless he makes financial restitution, Hashem will hold him liable for internally causing his fellow a monetary loss. Okay? And basically, when a person does an act that indirectly brings about damage to his fellow, he cannot be held liable in a human court, but is deemed responsible under heavenly judgment. In order for liability to be incurred under the laws of man, the damage must be done directly by a person himself, by his property, for example, his animal, or an obstacle that he created, a bore, a pit. In any case, well, in our case, for example, the damage is not directly attributable to the person or his obstacle, for the animal ate on its own initiative, but since by placing the poison there, he indirectly brought about its death, he is liable under the laws of heaven. So basically, what Rav Sheshes is saying is, look, how can it say he's not liable? He created damage because he had no permission to be there, and therefore, if the animal gorged on the food, he should make restitution, even if the law doesn't say it, because it's like leaving your poison there. You know what will happen if you leave your poison there. You know, it can create damage. You don't have permission. So I make a distinction here. Okay, let me just tell you my distinction, my 2 cents worth. I don't think the case is comparable for one reason. And maybe because I haven't learned the commentaries. I know that Rav Sheshes in his sleep would teach better Torah than me, and so would Rav. So I'm saying this because I don't know the rest other than the Schottenstein. Is poison as a default position will kill or injure. Eating food will not cause injury or death. And therefore, an animal's overindulgence is the animal's fault. A person that puts poison there for an animal or a person, by very virtue of a mere morsel or a taste of it, is liable to create damage. Therefore, even if it isn't direct, because the animal ate it itself and you never forced it, this thing was hazardous. It's very different. And to me, that would support Rav, because Rav is saying it's hazardous because the guy slipped in it. But food is food. It's not poison. That's just my 2 cents worth, guys. I'm not saying it's true. Okay? Let me just read on quickly. I know Kevin's got to go in a few minutes. But with respect to produce, which an animal does usually eat, if one places it before his fellow's animal and thereby causes it to overeat and die, he is liable to pay damages even under the laws of man. But according to Rav's teaching, why is this so? Let us say the animal should not have eaten it. Okay, so Rav Sheshes is making more sense. He's saying that basically, if an animal usually eats it, and therefore the animal overeats and dies, he's liable even under the laws of man. So let's just see why. Because an animal is instinctually eating, okay? And therefore the excessive produce is tantamount to a bore. It's like a pit which the animal lacks the intellect to avoid. So that's the discussion on the Chazon Ish on Torah Sachaim. So it's saying, look, Rav Sheshes is saying, look, food, and what do you think an animal does? An animal doesn't have a stop button with regards to food. An animal will eat if there's food there. So if it overindulges, that's your fault. It's like a ball. You created a hazard. Gavin?
Yeah, it's like a ball. You created a hazard, yeah?
Yeah, why have you created a hazard?
Because of the produce.
No, you see, I know when a guy doesn't listen because he just repeats that same sentence all guys use.
There's a hell of a noise going on. I think it's from my fridge. I try to stop it. It's just it's like an irritating noise in the back. It's like a zzz, like this. So I try to go sort it out. Sorry.
Kevin, I'll be with you in a minute. I'll give you a sec. Just give me a sec. All Rosh Hashanah is saying is that it is like poison. In other words, Rav is basically saying, listen, you're not liable for it. And Rav Sheshes is saying, listen, the animal doesn't know when to stop eating. You are liable. You don't have permission to be there. Okay, let's just see the answer and then we'll take questions. Okay, so Rav's ruling is defended. They say the law is actually the same even in the case of produce. If one who places an excess of it in front of an animal, which then overeats and dies, he is exempt from paying under the laws of man because the animal should not have eaten it. And this is what the Braisa informs us by dealing with the case of poison. That even in the case of poison too, where the animal does not usually eat it, the one who places it there is liable under the laws of heaven. Okay? Because you might have thought that since the animal is not accustomed to eating this item, the person who placed it there is not deemed to have killed it indirectly even. And is not liable for its death, even under the laws of heaven. The Braisa therefore explains otherwise. So the Gemara is basically saying that the Braisa is saying in the case of a poison, animals don't usually eat it, so that's why you would think you're not responsible. But the Braisa is saying you are responsible. And it's saying that the case as far as produce is concerned, the defense of Rav is different because he's exempt from paying under the laws of man because the animal should not have eaten it. So it's the same. An alternative answer, then we're done. Or if you prefer to say, when referring to poison 2, the Braisa is dealing with avratza. In other words, it's a type of produce that is poisonous to animals, but not people. So the Braisa itself means that even though the animal is expected to eat it, the person who places it there is exempt under the laws of man. For as Rav stated, the animal ultimately eats it under its own initiative. It's not like it falls into a pit. It bears some responsibility. Okay? So the Braisa chooses to teach a law regarding the case of eating a poisonous plant in the case of overeating ordinary foods to inform us that although the animal was certainly expected to eat some of it, and even the small amount, like the poison case, is sufficient to kill it, the person who places it there is exempt. So now, according to the final answer, the law will apply even if a person mixes poison in ordinary food and places it before the animal. Although the animal doesn't know to avoid eating it, he is exempt under the laws of man because he can claim that the animal should not have eaten it. All right, guys, we're going to finish at that point. Any questions before Gavin has to attend a share at 8? We've got a few minutes.
I'm fine. Gavin, Arthur?
I'm cool. I'm Australian, but I'm cool.
All right, so you know what, guys? We went today from 47A2 to 47B3. Now, that's very quick progress.
Yeah.
What I like about this pace, Dan, is like I'm listening to the sharing with the rabbi. Like every day, I seem to be keeping up beautifully. Goes quick, and so you don't sit there. How can I say, going over the same thing and you get bored? Yeah, it's like we're getting it quickly and moving ahead. It's like we're achieving something. It's just sitting like 2 weeks on the same piece.
I agree.
That's much better.
Yeah, I also agree with that. And if you do, I didn't prep for this, but Kevin did. It definitely, I saw from Kevin, it definitely helps.
Yeah, no, okay. So
Arthur prepped as well.
But it
I'll
wasn't
put
too
it
complicated,
again.
Gavin. It's
I'll be
not so
fine for-
complicated. Also, that's why it's
No,
not so. It's not
I'm
so
just-
complicated.
I'm tired. I'm very tired.
I'm
If
also
you're tired
tired.
and
Yeah.
but if you're tired and you've prepped, it's much easier. I'm having a very tired day. When Dad was talking,
Let's
I'm
wait for the
contemplating
next
what I'm
section of
thinking.
the husband and the fetus and everything. It's going to be great fun. Enjoy it.
What's that?
The next session, which I learned to hit by accident, I went ahead like 50 something already, and they were talking about if you owe somebody money, right, and you've got their possession, and they die before a certain time, it's like, how does it work? Can you collect from their property? Not collect from it? It's a bit of a thing there. Also about the fetus.
Okay.
And,
Awesome, thanks. Now we don't have to go over it. You've given it us.
Okay,
Thank you.
spoiler
Arthur.
alert.